stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
We have an interesting speaker this morning. And let me tell you how I came about inviting him to come. On one of the Fridays, I was pacing up and down the lobby waiting for our speaker to get here. And Marty was at the desk and he asked me what I was pacing about. I told him. He said, well, I have a guy that I think you guys would like to hear. I said, yeah, tell me a little bit about him. He said, well, he's the only guy that goes into the pool in zero weather, gets out and walks home in those wet clothes. I said, well, I don't normally look around for people walking around in wet clothes, but sounds like an interesting guy, and he told me a little bit about what he does. But Chris earned his PhD in psychology at UCLA in 2004. He has 20 years of government service, 12 of which was active duty in the Coast Guard. He helped evaluate for Navy SEALs. He presently is Director of Personnel for the Pirates, goes on all the drafts and concentrates on the psychological aspect. And maybe he'll mention it. I want to ask him, let's pretend for a moment that Antonio Brown plays baseball. How would your psychological evaluation be, Chris? I'd like you to comment on that. Let's welcome Chris Johnson.
Good morning. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come share a little bit. I'm from California. Just to give you an idea of sort of who you're dealing with, they told me it'd be just like San Diego here in Pittsburgh. So we moved the family out. My wife and I are both from LA, 3 kids. I've got 3 kids here at QV. And so at the time I was working for Naval Special Warfare and doing assessment and selection for special operations. And what I wanted to come talk to you guys about was less about specifically what we look for in Navy SEALs and more about talent identification in the 21st century. And I think, knowing that many of you either served in the military or successful businessmen, have run your own businesses or have accomplished in your own field, in terms of finding the people who are really good at what they do, it hasn't changed all that much. Some of the same qualities are still there. And so I'll share with you a little bit about what we look for. People who do well under high magnitude stress, people who do well under pressure, people who succeed where most other people don't. And I ended up getting the job with the Pirates because the Pirates were in town touring the base. And I think I was out in the surf with a bunch of the guys rolling around, and we started talking about how we pick the right people to do that. And so I went out to spring training a couple times and talked to the Pirates. And I had been, right at about 20 years of working for the government and was ready to try something else. I had no idea what I was getting into with the Pirates. So came on board with the Pirates, and what I do is part scouting, part analytics, and part decision making. And my role is to really shape the decision making space about who we go get. And the parallels from other industries is really interesting. So when I was with Naval Special Warfare, every 2 months we'd have about 300 eager young guys wanting to start BUDS, eventually put on a Trident and be a SEAL. And we run them through a pretty rigorous assessment and selection program. And by and large, we're looking for people who have superior attention skills, their ability to direct their attention, sustain their attention, divide their attention, their ability to be distraction-free, their ability to be problem solvers, to detect patterns, a lot of hand-eye abilities. And even then, when we pick them, they've got 18 months of pretty grueling training before they can say that they're Naval Special Operations. And even after they make it through that, something a lot of people don't know, and here's sort of the underlying take-home message in a world that is increasingly technologically oriented. Even the guys who finish this rigorous selection and assessment program, and then 18 months of grueling training, and they make it through and they get a Trident pinned on their chest, some of them don't ever make it to a team. And a lot of people don't know that. And they don't make it to a team because there's another interview process, an informal interview process with the teams that's a social evaluation. And that could be, sitting down with the guy's wife, girlfriend, family, getting to know them. At the end of the day, some of the guys that don't fit in never make it. It's not that they're bad people. It's just that the degree of trust and your ability to have social skills is so important, and something that's increasingly lost on young kids today because they just don't have the same social skills. The demands are not put on them in the same way. So you have to have people who are able to be dropped on the other side of the world and navigate their way through a village where they don't know anybody and find out who's who in the zoo and find allies and find resources and be successful. So those skills are increasingly at a premium. We see that playing out in baseball quite a lot. In baseball, everyone, at least the advertising part of it, is really geared toward technology and what they offer up as science. I would argue that not all of it is science, a lot of it is gadgetry, but it's science. And some of it has been amazing. There's no doubt that the types of players that are playing the game now are different. That said, interesting statistic. So about 19,000 men have played baseball at the highest level. Major League Baseball, about 19,000 of them. So this is a roughly 120-year history of baseball. Of those, just a little over 200 have been selected to the Hall of Fame. So that's a pretty inefficient system for identifying who's the best in the game and then who is the best in the game. So if you think about the number of people that we put into outer space, it's a little over 500. And that didn't start until the late 60s. So in some sense, we're better at selecting people to go into outer space than we are in selecting who's going to be the next Major League All-Star. So why is that so hard? What makes it so hard? And if you think back to your own work history and think back to the people who did really well versus the people who didn't, part of it is that we get seduced by physical attributes, or we get seduced by a resume, or we get seduced by an interview. And those things over time typically don't equate to success over the long term. a lot of it has to do with what goes on between the ears. And just as an interesting anecdote, so in addition to selecting for SEALs to enter the training pipeline, another thing that we did was we selected guys who are already SEALs to go train to be part of the development group. So the Tier 1 guys, the Team 6 guys. And so I spent a lot of time in shoot houses, walking around in the rafters, watching guys move through the shoot house. And the primary skill set that they're looking for at that level is the ability to make decisions under compressed space and time and handle stress well, and then fine motor skills. So hand-eye decision-making. And so I was talking to an experienced guy who'd been on a lot of operations, been on a lot of live targets. And I said, when you're picking guys for these missions, what are you looking for? And he summed it up, and it stayed with me to this day. He said, CJ, I'm looking for the guy who makes this shit look easy. Makes it look really easy. And there's so much wisdom in that, you know, and I spent a lot of time with him unpacking what is it that he sees that looks easy. Because these guys are moving through the house fast, and they're not talking to each other when they're doing it, and they're covering space, they're eliminating threats, they're making sure that they secure an objective in the right amount of time and keeping each other alive. So, interesting backdrop to this. So what goes on between the ears? So there was a psychologist at Stanford roughly 100 years ago named Lewis Terman, and he started what is to this day the longest ongoing study of intelligence that has ever been done. And it's still going, it's called the Stanford Study of Intelligence. So it's run for over 100 years now, but Terman wanted to look at the lives of truly exceptional people. And he thought it was all about intelligence. And so they studied IQ, and they helped develop the Stanford IQ test. But about 40 years ago, they took all this data, including twin data, and they studied the people who were identified as gifted or genius or super intelligent people. And they said, okay, I would think that there's a correlation between intelligence and success. And what they found is it really wasn't as strong as they thought it was going to be. But there were 4 factors that came out that were really strong predictors. They found that people who had the ability to direct their attention and sustain their attention on something, the people who had the ability to delay gratification, and the people who had ability to regulate their emotions, and the 4th piece was the people who were really good at working with other people. So attention, your ability to delay gratification, delay reward, your ability to keep your emotions in check, and then how well you work with others. Kind of the stuff that we all learn in kindergarten. But the people who had all of those in spades turned out to be really, really successful people. And those are a lot of the things that we selected for in the special operations community. And it's also what we select for at sports at the highest level. I also worked with the Golden State Warriors for a year in that transition between the SEALs and the Pirates. I like basketball, it's not the same high level of complexity. Basketball is more about raw athleticism, and you can be really good if you're an exceptional athlete. Baseball requires a broader collection of things. And it's also fascinating to me that when our operators would enter a shoot house, they had about 300 milliseconds to orient to a target, make a threat, non-threat determination, and shoot, don't shoot. So it's about 1/3 of a second that they're doing that with high precision. 300 milliseconds is also about what a major league hitter has to make a swing, don't swing decision when they're standing at the plate on a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. Not many people throwing 90 miles an hour anymore. It's faster than that. So the parallels there are interesting. Obviously, different consequences. But not to go off on a tangent, the people who designed baseball back in the day, that's genius. If the mound were a little farther away or a little closer, the advantage would be so far, either to the pitcher or the hitter. Right where they put it, 60 feet, 6 inches, it's amazing the tension that has really brought out, because 30% success rate and you are going to the Hall of Fame. So in terms of how we evaluate players, one thing that we don't have, that we did have with special operations, I tell our scouting director all the time, I said, hey, every 2 months when I was looking for guys down in Coronado, we got who we wanted. I didn't have 29 other teams taking guys that we wanted. So that's very different. But to answer your Antonio Brown question, so I'll do it in an indirect way, because I don't know him, and I haven't had a whole lot of contact with the Steelers or how they do things, but that case, from what I know about it, isn't really that unique, because when you're dealing with elite performers, it comes in all shapes and sizes, and usually it's rare talent, it's premium talent. And one of the things that we've talked about since coming on board with the Pirates is a lot of times people will misunderstand good makeup as he's a nice guy and he's easily coachable and he's team oriented. And that won't get you a championship. It'll make for a great Boy Scout troop, probably makes great for your local HOA, but it won't get you where you want. When I was in Coronado, every couple of months we'd have a team guy get in some serious trouble, getting into a fight. We even had a couple of them selling weapons to the cartels down in Mexico, just across the border. And the admirals would inevitably come to us and say, look, I thought we were screening for this stuff. When are we going to be able to reliably predict who's going to be a problem? And we can, but we're also selecting for some of these things that don't often play well out in the real world. So the job that we're asking these guys to do, it doesn't lead to positive adaptable traits everywhere else, because the job is so specialized. So sometimes the rough around the edges and the don't play well in the sandbox with other people, sometimes you're gonna have a little bit of that in order to get some extraordinary result. I don't know that I want a locker room full of that, but every now and then, that's what drives guys like that. And one of the things, so I talked to Clint Hurdle about this a lot, and a year and a half ago at spring training, we had a couple of our players that were talking to the media, talking outside of school, talking outside the organization, and Clint was frustrated by that, and I said, yeah, your really high-performing players are going to be difficult to deal with. They're also probably really good teammates, but not in the supportive way. They're really good at identifying who in the group and on the team can help us achieve the objective, and they're going to compete, and they're going to get other people to compete, and that doesn't always come across as nice. It can come across as selfish. It can come across as not team-oriented or short-sighted. But at the end of the day, what they have is something unique, and that is just an intense drive to win, an intense drive to be the best, and you can't shortchange that. The art to it is balancing needs of self with needs of the group. Ideally, you want a nice mix of that, and so that's part art, part science. I wish there was a formula that we could share and say, you need this number of guys in with another number of guys to get the ideal composition. But the team aspect of it is real. It doesn't mean everybody on the team is team oriented. So when we look for guys, we're looking for guys who have exceptional hand-eye, exceptional my background is really, it's in cognitive science. So, and that deals, cognitive science really starts where vision ends. So I talk to optometrists all the time. Maybe some of you in here are optometrists. We do vision testing for our players. Vision testing tells us one thing, but really what we want to know is how fast does that visual signal go and get processed through the brain and turn into a behavioral action. And some people are faster than others. There are people out there that no matter how physically gifted they are, how smart they are never going to be able to see and hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. I tell our guys I was talking to a couple of our coaches the other day, and I said, hey, doesn't matter how good of a coach you are. I could train all of us for 5 years, and we're probably not going to be able to land an F-16 on a carrier at night. It's really hard to do, and I don't think everybody can do it. So how do we find those people? Well, we screen them, and part of our screening is looking at the attention concentration, emotion regulation, ability to delay gratification, and social skills. And so, you know, I guess my take-home message is the things that mattered back in the day, the things that mattered to all of us in our fields in terms of who was successful and who wasn't, those are still some of the same things. We just have different ways of getting at them. The last 100 years has been largely about physiology, and now we're starting to understand a little bit more how to get at what happens between the ears. It's more of a mystery because it's harder to see, but we're starting to be able to get at some of those things. So that's what I have. I thought maybe I'll open it up to questions if anybody has them.
Okay.
Hi. I'm just wondering, do all or most Major League teams have someone in your position? Or is it just the Pirates? Because what I'm saying is the Pirates, I like to say it's not working, but I mean,
Yeah.
they're where they are, and other teams are better, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so to your point, no, most teams do not have somebody like me. What they do have is depth. They have more depth. So we have to do a couple things different than other teams do. We have to draft better, and we have to develop better. And what we're all seeing and being frustrated with is that we can do well in the draft, but if we don't have the same number of really good players, it looks like we're thin, and you get exposed. And that's what's happening, is we're getting exposed at our lack of depth. Where, just for comparison's sake, if we nail the draft, that means we picked two guys that end up being major leaguers. That's a successful draft. So, some background, 1,200 players go up on the board every year. So that's 30 teams that pick 40 rounds. That's 1,200 players. Of that 1,200, roughly 15 of them will be major league players. So if you nail one player from your draft that becomes a major leaguer, it's success. If you get two, you potentially change the organization. So not everybody does that. When you do it, it's not enough. You have to be able to supplement. And the teams that are perennial competitors, they draft well, they develop well, and they add to it where they missed. So if you miss, maybe a guy doesn't turn out, they can backfill. And so it's really a depth question. But I feel you. I mean, I didn't grow up here. I didn't have a real, I had no other connection to the Pirates other than meeting with a couple of the front office folks, and I thought their vision for what they wanted and how they wanted to do it was spot on. And I'll tell you this, there's some really talented people in the organization. We're playing with a different deck of cards, so we have no margin for error.
kind of walk me through this. You get between their ears before. Do you also get between their ears after? And specifically, Josh Bell, before the All-Star game, hitting the cover off the ball. He's now batting .282, so to drop from whatever it was, 340 down to 282,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Underproduction, underachievement. So where do you fit in apart from trying to project what the players will be?
So I fit in at the select or not select side, and I'm not dodging this. I wasn't here when we drafted Josh. That said, he's an exceptional talent. A couple things have happened. One is who is getting in his ear. I'll share with you something. It's fascinating what happens. So baseball, 162 games plus 30 games in spring training. These guys go home and they all have their own personal guy they go home to. And when they go home to those guys, they get more rest. They eat a little differently. Their day-to-day schedule looks differently. All of a sudden they start feeling great. And they can get caught up in some advice that doesn't always translate to success during the season. But they feel really good. And then they look at the staff that the team provides and they think, I never feel great when I'm doing that. Maybe I should listen to this other guy more. So these guys have all kinds of people in their ear. So that's a component. Who am I trusting? Who am I listening to? Another component is the league adjusts. The league makes incredible adjustments. So you take a young hitter who comes in, who's knocking the cover off the ball, they're going to make adjustments. And with him, it's off speed. If I'm a pitcher, I'm throwing off speed to Josh all day. So constant adjustments. I'll share with you this. I think the most important acquisitions that we've made since I've been here, and that's 5 seasons, has been Rick and David Eckstein and Jake Cruz. Those two came in to spring training this year with the expectation, look, you're going to start with Josh Bell, you're going to start with Colin Moran, and if we have any chance at all, those guys have to be good. And Rick Eckstein and David Eckstein launched into a program of changing the way these guys, their approach at the plate and their swing path. And it's taken time, but it has made a difference. If you look at run production, different. So that said, the last cap has to do with your question. We need these guys to be so good. We don't have any backup or any margin for error. When they're not, the detriment to us is magnified. So when Josh isn't hitting, it hurts us way more than it hurts when Bellinger is going through a similar bump.
Yeah, but a bad team is going to win at 400. This team has won, I think, 9 games since the All-Star break, which I'm not sure what that is, but I think it's around 300. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of baseball fans in this town, and they're getting real tired of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't doubt it, and I don't blame them. There's significant frustration in within the office and within the dugout and the clubhouse too. There's nobody that I've talked to that says, "Yeah, we're fine."
Yeah, you mentioned skills, hand-eye coordination, social skills. You mentioned kindergarten. I think today it's even pre-K. Learning those skills, and if you don't get, through no fault of your own, if you can't get those skills, then you're kind of like Ott.
Well, what I'd say one of the most important skills that's being filtered out, unfortunately, is the fourth one, which is ability to work well within a group. That's why family, traditional family or otherwise, is so important. And I've had people ask me this. You talk about family and group, and so why is that so important? It's important because it is the first laboratory, if you will, for a young mind to learn how to balance my needs with the needs of the group. If you don't have that, or that gets disrupted, it is going to.
But you don't get it. I mean,
Correct.
they're not giving it to you.
That's what I'm saying. If you don't have that, then it is going to impair development in all other areas.
And you have no control over it.
No.
You're a kid.
No. Yep.
The collapse of the pitching staff, I think, has hurt them more than the
Big time.
offense. What's happening with the Pirates there? I mean, you see Charlie Morton, he leaves, all of a sudden, he becomes very, very good. I mean, they always said he had great stuff. The same thing with the other guy that went to Houston. I can't think of his name right now, but Cole. Felice last year was terrific, and a lot of these guys in the bullpen were terrific last year. Now all of a sudden, it's like they're telling in the one baseball game where the guy had a great fastball, and he wouldn't listen to the catcher, so he told the batter, fastball coming right down the middle. It's almost like they're telling these players what's coming next, and they're teeing off on it.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, especially considering at the beginning of the year, one of the things that we were banking on was that let's build around this rotation. Let's build around the rotation because we think our rotation is good enough to keep us in games. And we really liked our bullpen, especially 7, 8, 9. Pretty strong. But it has not worked out like anybody thought. And we're still looking at what adjustments have players made when they leave and what adjustments have they made when they get here. Where we have to be careful is you take somebody like a Charlie Morton who, when he went to Houston, all of a sudden he just started throwing up in the zone. And Charlie can throw 95 plus and it moves, and if he's throwing up in the zone, that's very different than Trevor Williams throwing up in the zone at 90. And so, again, this speaks to the league figuring guys out. So Trevor Williams goes out, and if you try and chase that approach, okay, the industry looks like they're throwing up in the zone because everybody's swing is designed for launch angle. They're trying to get under it and uppercut it. So throw it up in the zone can be effective, but it's got to be high velocity. So Trevor Williams, if he throws up in the zone, that's going to get hit a long way. And then if he leaves his breaking stuff up in the zone, that's going to get hit too. So there's a temptation to chase techniques and tactics in the industry, but you gotta know your people. And there's a balance between, okay, what is a methodology that works with, let me look at this guy, let's find out what his signature strengths are, what does he do really well, and go with that. I mean, it's something that I talk all the time about. Look, what got you here? What got you here? Go out and do that. Go do that. Because that's worked. And if it doesn't work, then we'll go back to the drawing board. Sir?
I'd like to hear your opinion as to what social media has done to the attitude of the athletes today.
Yeah, it's made us more isolated. It's made us less capable of having an in-depth conversation. I think it's also, in a weird way, it's eroded people's normal expectations of privacy. The thing is that people are okay with the rest of the world knowing is amazing to me. And when that happens, your sense of real community starts to erode. And so social media, in a way, it's people say things that they wouldn't normally say to someone's face. So it makes discourse nastier, more critical, hyper judgmental. And so
Is Antonio Brown.
Right, right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, now, so the generation that's coming in, I was just out in San Diego looking at it's called Perfect Game. It's a high school showcase, and we're looking at a bunch of kids that are going to be seniors in high school, and they've all got, social media, but now it's scrubbed, and some of them even have advisors, not agents, but advisors who help shape that. So now it's become crafted. It's almost like a lesser form of a PR person. So where you used to be able to mine that stuff and kind of get an idea of what you're dealing with, now everything is so scripted and sterile, and sometimes not even coming from the kid. You don't know what you're dealing with.
I think your presentation on leadership is excellent, and social skills.
Hold it closer to your.
I'm sorry, I used to be a player a few years ago, so I come at this a little differently, and forgive me, but I had to try out with the Pirates. I'm a Philadelphia guy first, so I have the Phillies, the Eagles, and I have the Steelers, Pirates. What's happened out here is the Pirates have lost the locker room. And I'll give that as an example. Kutch left here a couple of years ago, and then Kutch came to Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia's got two problems. $330 million to one player with an ego, and then they have some mediocre players. Kutch came in to the Phillies locker room and turned that around. The same thing is with the Eagles. There was a couple ex-Steelers that came in there, and those players ran the locker room. What you have lost out here, and this is just what I see from a player around the league. The Pirates, go back to the Mets many years ago when they didn't have anything, but they won, but they had a locker room. The Steelers need a locker room and a leader. So my question would be this. You're young, you're not spending a lot of money, you're getting good talent, but if Kutch came back here, if he went in the locker room, and a couple of the ex-guys, maybe even Harris and some of these guys, they don't have to be superstars, but somebody's got to lead that locker room other than the coaches. Is there anybody that you have on the team that you can see can come back up and lead that team? It'll take a hell of a lot off of Bell, but somebody's got to lead it other than, quote, coaches or yourself.
2 points in response. One is you couldn't be more right about the need for strong leadership, strong personalities. I can't speak to what Kutch has done in Philadelphia. I will say that that wasn't his role here.
Yeah.
So, and I think he was pretty, not open, but he would admit, look, that's not what I do. I just go out and play.
Right.
So even when he was here, I would tell you that the center of gravity was not around him. In terms of who we have coming up, I'd say that the most strong leadership trait in a player that I have seen, right now he's in AAA and he's waiting to come up, and you guys have gotten a little glimpse of him. It's Cole Tucker. In terms of the ability to connect with other people, the ability to inspire and persuade, and edge and energy. We talk a lot about edge and energy. So, that said, a lot of this depends somewhat on how good you are too, and we really don't know. We have hopes for we have hopes for Cole Tucker. Excuse me. We have hopes for Cole Tucker, but the gap between AAA and the major leagues is never been bigger than it is right now. It used to be just another step.
Right.
Now the gap is huge in terms of how good you have to be to see and hit major league breaking stuff. Way different now. So a lot of how successful somebody like Cole Tucker is going to be, is he playing every day? Is he the everyday shortstop? And if he is, I would bet on him.
It's clear to me that baseball has become the most data-driven major league sport of all that we look at.
I would agree.
I had an athletic career in college 60 years ago, in the mid to late 50s. And two of the fellows I played with became All-Americans and then had significant NFL careers. And I knew, as did the coaches, when I saw those guys go on the field for the first time, they were out of my, I was a journeyman level player. They were absolutely way up here. Both of them made All-Pro in the NFL. And there was a certain sense or feel about that circumstance of just seeing it and knowing it was going to happen, rather than all the data now that goes into making these decisions. And I pine for the old stuff a little bit, I guess.
I'm with you, and I'm trying to change that, and here's how. So I've been surprised at how much of a narrow slice of cognitive science the sports industry has really been exposed to. And it's a lot of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's work on biases and errors in judgment. So this school of thought, not to go complete academic on you, but it is one school of thought, and that is that we're predictably illogical, we're bad at making decisions because we're inherently biased. And in order to rise above that, we're going to automate everything and keep it as objective as possible. The problem with it is it's just not true, but it makes a great story. In fact, you can make a movie out of it. So what cognitive science is telling us, and this isn't my opinion, these are serious scholars at business schools, at the Max Planck Institute on risk literacy, investment banking, MBA programs. There's a slow sea change starting to happen, identifying how expertise can outperform completely automated algorithms. And because I'm into talent identification, I have a heart for the scouting industry. There's wisdom in how these guys do what they do. They're really good ones. They have expertise because it's consistent with how the brain works. The brain is highly sophisticated and incredibly accurate at doing a few things. One is pattern recognition. Our brains are wired for identifying patterns, detecting outliers, similarities. And so this is how the brain works. When you're looking at talent identification, the brain says, you're observing someone, and it says, what is that? The next thing it says is, where have I seen that before? And the next thing is, the last time I saw that, what happened? Scouts, the good ones, are masters at that. And the language of scouting is in comparables. Oh, that guy reminds me of so-and-so. That guy reminds me of so-and-so. Masters at that. However, the big challenge is that expertise, true expertise, you know way more than you can articulate. So if I'm a GM sitting at the table and I've got a young kid just out of college that's got a stack of Excel spreadsheets, and I've got 3 of my best scouts, and they all tell me, look, this kid, player A, he's going to be a major leaguer. It's just, I know it. I've seen this before. He's going to be a major leaguer. And the spreadsheets say something else. I got to go back to ownership. When that doesn't work out, it's a lot easier for me to go, look, here are the numbers. We missed on this one. Then my best guys told me that they thought he was going to do it. So we've got to be able to fight through that. We've got to be able to articulate why we should trust expertise. Much of the data-driven philosophy, which I think is a big mistake, we need to be data-informed. We need to make our decisions through our subject matter experts and have information inform gaps. So one of the things that we've just started doing is something I've noticed when I listen to my favorite thing to do is to go to the park, sit with our veteran scouts, and break down players. What do you see? Oh, what do you see? Okay, and we share. When scouts write about a player, they put a grade on them. It's a 20 to 80 grade. And then that goes into the system, the machine. When they talk about players, it's very different than that grade. But modern baseball doesn't have a way of accounting for how is the scout describing this player. So one of the things that we've started doing is looking at language analysis. So when the scouts write about the players, take the numbers out of it. When he writes about this player, use modern day tools to analyze that language and say, oh, he's written about these players in the same way that this guy was written about 15 years ago. And that becomes a comp that you would never see if all you did was look at the numbers. So I'm with you on the whole data-driven thing because it's a mistake. Expertise is real, we're just really bad at articulating it.
Hi, 2 questions.
Sure.
First, Cervelli is going. Did you have a say in that?
No.
Number 2, did you see the movie Trouble with the Curve?
Yes.
And what'd you think of it?
I liked it. I like Clint Eastwood. I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan, and I have 3 kids. 2 of them are daughters. If one of them ever wanted to become a scout, I think that'd be amazing. I think that movie was an entertaining simplification of the struggle that a lot of the scouts are dealing with. And part of what I do is, it's amazing that the more I get into cognitive science, the more these guys were right. They had it right back in the day. You know, these movies like Moneyball will make fun of scouts talking about the kid's got a good face, good handshake. Well, guess what? I dug up a couple studies of handshakes and what is Google doing now in terms of interviewing? The technology is all designed around facial recognition. So we make fun of scouts for talking about, oh, he's got a good face. What does that tell you? Well, I don't know. The entire tech industry is moving toward facial recognition to read into emotions and personality and intent and deception. So these guys had it right. They had it right. They're just horrible communicators of why they were right. So part of what I do, funniest thing that I heard from a veteran scout trying to read players, he told me, he goes, look, when you see a young kid and he's got a girlfriend, pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. I said, okay, why? He goes, because she knows way before we do if he's got any chance. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Sir.
Does your psychological evaluation of players differ based upon whether they're from North America or Latin America?
No, and so I don't do psychological evaluations. I do more brain cognitive evaluation. So how fast does this process hand-eye? To your point, we do personality assessment. The assessment that we use is based on the Big Five, and it is probably the most well-researched. The Big Five, there aren't a whole lot of differences depending on culture or country, and that's, I mean, it's been studied, I mean, I'm going to say confidently in over 120 different countries. So not all of them, but many. The differences that we see are individual differences and have less to do with where they come from.
On going back to Moneyball, did you think the Pirates could do something, get somebody to do that analyzing? It's better to get somebody on base rather than getting one home run, in a game and getting more people on base that can bring in runs. Is there any possibility in that kind of a situation?
Sure, there are elements of that approach that are beneficial, but I mean, yeah, it hasn't happened. I mean, if you want to be very literal, what they tried in Oakland didn't work, and it's not like teams are doing that now. I really believe that even the term Moneyball, it's a media-driven story. It really, I don't know any team that's out there. In fact, home runs are higher now than they've ever been in the game. So I don't think people are going out there selecting for guys that walk a lot. But it makes the media can't help themselves with the story.
I'm hearing you talk about organic versus data-driven. Data, to me, has a very short shelf life when you're talking sports. In a couple of the industries that I'm really familiar with, one, music. Most of music today is done by synthesizers, so forth, versus the organic back in the 60s and 70s, way back before all this stuff. That music is longer lasting than the music that's coming out today.
That's why it's classic.
Exactly. I just retired from the airline industry. These new kids coming up are looking at just data. They don't have the stick and rudder skills as we talk about, and we're seeing an accident rate where they're looking at data, and when the data lies to them, they don't know what to do. And I think that could carry through your industry, through a lot of industries in life. This is not good. Well, it's not good at all.
No, it's not. And the other thing that's happened is it's really engendered a distrust of expertise and a marginalization of human experience. So then you have inexperienced people bringing cold numbers to a situation and an inability to prioritize how much should I weight the advice that I'm getting and where it's coming from. So I had this discussion with some of our analysts. I said, look, you guys are very convinced that a formulaic approach, one, you assume that it's more objective. Just because you put a number on it, you think it's more certain. There's a subjective component to that, whether you realize it or not. What are you measuring and what are you weighting? That's subjective. Two is formulas don't always work without context. Context is so important, and that's what scouting is. Scouting is all about context. You can tell me what a hitter hit. You can tell me how fast the ball went out of the park, but the scout's going to tell you, yeah, I saw the guy had a fight with his girlfriend in the parking lot before the game, or I know this guy's dad's got cancer, or the old guy throwing him batting practice was different than the normal person that throws in batting practice. All of those things are really important context. So I was talking to him and I said, look, let me give you guys an example. What is the formula for work? You know, rate of work, energy, time. You know, they talk about the formula for work. And that is a tried and true formula. If you want to know how much can be produced in a given amount of time, you plug in the numbers, you have a formula for work. I said, okay, so it takes one woman 9 months to make a baby. So if we had 9 women, they could make a baby in 1 month. You let me know who you sell that to. Your formula doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because you don't understand how human development and context work.
Well, data always looks back.
Yes.
It can never look forward.
It's a great point. Yes, absolutely.
Whereas this right here can look forward.
And if you're
Data can look back.
That's right. If you're uncomfortable with uncertainty, no matter how good your data are, you have to go beyond the data set. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I am. This perspective is not popular in the game right now, but what's interesting is there's always a double take when they hear it and they learn that my background is in cognitive science. But most industries have only been exposed to one area of cognitive science, and that is errors in judgment and bias. And those things are real, but the studies from the 70s and 80s that a lot of that thinking comes from, they've been shown there's more to it than that. We're not inherently biased. Those are actually intelligent inferences that we make. It's a unique skill set, and we shouldn't marginalize it. If you understand it better, you get more out of it. Sir?
Listening to what you're looking for in a player, skill, hustle, team player,
Are you a righty or a lefty?
righty or lefty. Anyway, I think that fit Corey Dickerson to a T. And yet, I mean, he was a good fielder, a good batter, hustled, and he's the only guy that got traded. If I'm building a team, he's the exact guy I would want to build a team around, I think.
Yeah, no, and so a couple things on that. I'm with you. Look, I can't explain all of the player moves that we make. I would agree with you on Corey. Also, within the context of him being the only one, there has to be another party in order for these deals to happen. And so the moves that are made are about the fact that there were two people willing to do a deal. There are other deals to be had that you don't have two parties agreeing on. So I'm with you, and I have the same questions and the same frustration about what are we doing, what's our goal, what's the strategy here. I'm also, here to support the final effort. Captain can only have one ship. So, but your questions are good, and I think there's an understanding that we're not all going to see it the same way. And at the end of the day, decisions are being made by the leaders.
You meant in your assessments, you mentioned personality types. What kind of instruments do you use? For example, do you apply a Myers-Briggs?
No,
Or,
we use a NEO.
okay, and you mentioned intelligences too, so are you, do you apply any instruments that would measure, say, Gardner's various intelligences? We're not just looking at IQ here, you're looking at a whole picture.
Academic tangent, I'm not a huge fan of Gardner's multiple intelligences. I think in a school setting, it might be beneficial for what we're trying to do. It's not, we use the Ravens because it's nonverbal, and we want to be, we're less interested in crystallized intelligence and what people have learned in school, especially if you start talking about international players. It doesn't really matter what they've learned in school, and a lot of them have had less advantage and less socialized to testing in general, but are just as capable. So we use pattern recognition as a very coarse fluid intelligence measure. So, yeah. I'd say the most weight we give is to neuropsych assessment. So we have a battery of attention, concentration, divided attention, even risk, inhibition, go, no-go, time estimation, those types of things. Yeah, we get more purchase from that than anything else. So, yeah.
You sort of answered the question. You don't have a good 06, so the 1-1 and the 1-0 can't do their job.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, that's well said.
Okay, we're going to take one more question here, and after the meeting, I guess some other questions can be answered.
You mentioned Cole Tucker. We had Hope Springs a turnoff for us Pirate fans, but what about there's a guy at third base there in the minors, and the new guys that came up, Reynolds and Frazier, and so are you allowed to talk about what you see in them and
sure
how they're going to help us?
Yes.
God willing, in the future.
Yeah, with the caveat that, again, the leap from AAA to Major Leagues has never been bigger. So I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about Ke'Bryan Hayes. I think the thinking is around him, especially that the glove is ready now. The glove is now ready and will be all-star potential third baseman for years to come. I mean, it's special talent, and I can tell you, from seeing him, he's special. So what we're all waiting on, and the thing that comes last, you'll hear scouts say it all the time, is power develops last. Power comes last. So it's the one thing that we've really lacked in terms of our position players, and that's game-changing power. We have one guy who's got game-changing power. And as the gentleman who was here earlier was saying, it's been a struggle. One day he's hitting the cover off the ball, the next day he's not. But Josh Bell's got special power, and he's driven and very smart. So in the end, I would bet on somebody like him to figure it out. So Hayes coming up, I think, is a definite add for us. So if you look at our core of young players, there is reason for optimism. I think we're looking at pitching and catching as a way, the first step fortified.
What are you going to do with Moran and Hayes?
Yeah, they're going to compete, which is always good. I think that brings out the best in people. Worst thing that you can have is somebody who gets comfortable in their spot. So they're going to compete, and we'll see who produces.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Good job. Remember, no meeting next week, but the week following is going to be